Shelby. Shelby GT500. That's a hell of a name to put on the side of a car. In the 1960s, after having already established himself as one of the fastest race car drivers in the world, Carroll Shelby became the go-to guy to take any car that was meh and turn it into something amazing.
My name's Carroll Shelby, and performance is my business.
Through the years, the name Shelby has been plastered all over the sides of cars, some of which, shall we say, maybe took advantage of the Shelby name more than they took advantage of the Shelby engineering genius. In fact, one might say that Carroll Shelby was even better at marketing than he was at building cars. So the question that I have is, if this GT500 lives up to its legendary Shelby name, which legend are we talking about? The engineering genius or the marketing genius? The first thing you need to know is just how big of a deal the original Mustang was when it dropped in 1964. The second thing you need to know is that that car was a complete sham. It looked the business, but underneath the sexy sports car body was a compact economy car. In today's terms, imagine underneath the Mustang was a Fiesta. Enthusiasts didn't buy it, and so enthusiasts did not buy Mustangs. Despite the huge sales, the Mustang had a big image problem.
Should a single girl buy a Mustang? A 66 Mustang? Oh! Well, let's see.
Mustang's everything you could ask for on a secretary's salary.
Wow. Ford's solution was to turn the Mustang into a race car, and when they approached Carroll Shelby to do this, his response was, "You can't make a racehorse out of a mule." Ouch. But this was Carroll Shelby, and making racehorses out of mules is what he was in the middle of doing, turning the GT40 into the Ferrari-killing Le Mans winner. At the same time, Shelby sprinkled much of that same magic onto the secretary's car. The race Mustang was pretty successful, but of course, I'm much more interested in the road-going homologation versions. When it came time to name the thing, Shelby said, look, if it's a good car, the name won't matter. And if it's a bad car, the name won't save it. Genius. I wish marketing people today understood that. Shelby quickly came up with the name GT350. Not because it had a 350 cubic inch engine, it didn't, or 350 horsepower, it didn't. 350 was the distance between Shelby's two shops, 350 feet, which was about as far as normal people would go before complaining about the GT350. It may have been street legal, but it was a race car, with all the compromises that implies. Shelby realized something. People said they wanted a race car for the street, but they didn't. What they really wanted was a car that seemed like a race car. And what seems more like a race car than anything else? Power! And that's why I'm driving this, a GT500. The new for 1967 Mustang had a lot more room under the hood, and Shelby realized he could fit the big block. So he did. He installed the Police Interceptor motor, which was not 500 cubic inches, it was 428-ish, and was not 500 horsepower, it was 355-ish, and before you ask, 420 foot-pounds of torque. The GT500 was an absolute animal, hitting 60 miles an hour in less than 6.5 seconds. But it would have been even quicker had it not weighed 500 pounds more than the GT350. And no, that's not where the 500 in its name comes from either. The GT500 was, despite the appearance and the acceleration, actually comfortable. It was a good GT, a GT with 500 of something. And that's a lot of somethings. However, unlike the GT350, which could go around a corner, the GT500 couldn't. This is the new GT500, and if history were to repeat itself, why, this would be a fat cow. Well, it It did, and it is. It just took a DNA test. Turns out it's 100% fat bitch.
Feeling good as hell.
All that weight makes this a nice around town car. It's smooth, it's sedate, it's a little boring. In normal mode, the dual clutch slurs its shifts like an old slush-o-matic. It's even got a quiet mode, which can't do anything about the loud paint on this car, but acoustically at least, you might slip by unnoticed. But in the last 50 years, engineers have figured out a bunch of ways to make a fat cow dance. Wow, that is a lot of grip and balance. Oh my God. Oh my God. Absurd. It's one thing to have stupid power. This has that. It's another to have stupid brakes. Has that too. It's another to have stupid grip. It's something completely different to have all of them and have them be so manageable. This thing is like a 760 horsepower Miata, except that it puts its 760 horsepower down to the ground easier than a Miata puts its 181. It is everything you want from a track car. I cannot believe I'm saying that about a 760 horsepower Mustang. Just like 50 years ago, the GT350 is supposed to be the track car. This thing has 500 pounds more, most of which is over the front wheels, and no, that is not where the name comes from. But this isn't supposed to go around corners. This is supposed to be the straight line car, and it's every bit as good as the GT350R, only faster. And I don't mean like a little bit faster, I mean a lot faster. 110. Inconceivable! That speedometer is just stupid. Is it in kilometers? Let's talk about this whole fast thing, shall we? That is fast. That's a Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat. It has 717 horsepower, none of which can ever make it to the ground, which is why the more powerful Demon and Red Eye versions are no faster unless you're on a prepped surface, which we're not. But we are on an empty airfield with a beautiful girl with a flag, which means I have no choice but to race him. Jesus, faster in second. Oh no, he's coming. 100 and wow. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Whew, this is a fast car. Well, the Predator just got its first kill. And no, I'm not talking about your creepy new neighbor. That is the Predator, which is the new version of Ford's 5.2-liter Voodoo V8 from the Shelby GT350. But in place of the flat plane crankshaft, Ford put in a conventional cross plane crankshaft, which is stronger, but it's heavier. So unfortunately, instead of 8,200 RPM, this engine only revs to 7,500, which would suck if they didn't supercharge it from 526 to 760 horsepower. They also got rid of that magnificent 6-speed manual and replaced it with a 7-speed dual clutch, which mercifully shifts super fast. Super fast. That reminds me of another 800 horsepower front engine rear drive two-seater. Ferrari calls this the 812 Superfast. And they meant it. Thanks to a 9,000 RPM, 6.5 liter, 789 horsepower V12, it is, by some margin, the quickest accelerating front-engine rear-drive production car in the world ever. Cut, we can't do this no more. Oh no, not this asshole again. This ain't the 1960s when no one was treating women right. This is 2019. We can't objectify this intelligent woman. We're gonna objectify someone. It needs to be someone terrible, like him. Yeah, get going, curmudgeon. You're doing flag duty.
Just one more kiss to dish, a sweet little sugar pie. Your kiss is so delicious, a sweet little sugar pie.
So the GT500 is fast AF, which we now know does not stand for as Ferrari. Tempting though it is to go down the whole Ford versus Ferrari road, I need to point out that that rivalry happened only on the racetrack, in places like Le Mans, where I need to point out that Ferrari hasn't won since. But do you know who has?
Porsche, that's who. 19 times. 19 times.
Sir Randy.
Self-destruct initiated.
Where race cars are concerned, it's not only the winningest manufacturer at Le Mans, it also makes this, the GT3 RS, which is probably the best track weapon sports car ever made. I'm coming for you, Jason, on your left.
Now, all I have to do is keep up with him. Here's the thing, I could just get him on the straights.
Man, he's pulling me on the straights, but in the braking in the corners, I'm reeling him in. Coming through.
Oh, look at that line. It's the Randy Pope's line. I'm learning the Randy Pope's racing line. This GT500 is based on a $20,000 rental car. I cannot believe it's even remotely keeping up with Randy in a winged GT3 RS.
Because Jason, mine's higher, but yours is longer.
You have two of them.
That is not a wing, that's a spoiler.
Did anyone ever tell you you're a nerd?
Yeah, a lot.
Okay, but you're a right nerd. But that's the point here. This isn't just a 911 or a GTS or a GT3. It's a GT3 RS. And this isn't just a Mustang or even a GT or a GT350. It's a 500.
Yeah, this is the heavy artillery.
Right. So am I crazy in thinking this Mustang has any chance at all against an RS?
Jason, Anybody that knows you knows you're crazy. But we know the 350 was really good. And this is a 500. And most times in this world, power rules.
Good point. We must now find out how fast these cars go around our track. And to do that, we must hand them over to a tame race car driver.
I'm literally right here.
Some say his Christian name is Randy effing Popst.
This guy is crazy.
And that he's an SCCA Hall of Fame race car driver. All we know is he's called the Stick.
Yeah, look in the mirror, fat ass. What? No manual? Where's the fun in that? Yeah! Oh, it's absolutely got the power. They're not kidding. This car does not feel like any 4,200 pounds. This car grabs the track. It's like it has claws. Look at that. It rips off a corner. Man, it goes down the straightaways. This thing's only 500 something horse. It doesn't feel that slow. Porsche sets the standard. It's firm, very linear in response. I can just point it through these S's. 9,000. That engine just keeps going.
Ladies and gentlemen, a virtual tie. Well, there you have it. Less than 0.2 of a second separate the Mustang and the Porsche. I love that we live in a world where a Mustang can compete against a 911 GT3 RS, and not just in terms of lap time, but in terms of how they feel. And by the way, there's a caveat here. Well, I don't pretend for a second that a Mustang competes with a Porsche 911 GT3 RS or a Ferrari, any Ferraris, but judged against the benchmarks and the best, the Mustang still feels good. That's amazing. The GT500 isn't just a one-trick pony burnout machine the way muscle cars were 50 years ago or really even 10 years ago. No, the big story here is that Ford has changed what the GT500 name means. That is now a real sports car. If you're still wondering which Shelby legend this GT500 lives up to, it's all of them. Like the original, today's GT500 is one of the most powerful cars of its day. But this one is about way more than just straight line speed. It does corners like a GT350, but it's even easier to drive fast, and it's more civilized, docile even. So it's a better GT. How much better? At least 150 more of something.